My boyfriend wanted to make fun of me in front of his best friend, so I let him. I'd been working at this marketing firm for 8 months and dating my boss for 6 of them. I know how that sounds, but he pursued me, and honestly, everything was perfect, except when it came to Bob. Bob was his college roommate who worked as a consultant for our biggest client. The first time it happened, we had dinner reservations at this place I'd been dying to try for months. I was already dressed when he texted me that Bob needed his car for a work emergency. I offered to pick him up instead, but he said Bob needed him too. Bros before dates, you understand. His exact words. I remember staring at my phone thinking it was a joke. The thing is, I needed this job. I'd moved across the country for it, broken my lease, and this company was the only one doing the kind of sustainable marketing I'd specialized in. So I swallowed it and hoped it was just a one-time thing. 2 weeks later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to Bob pounding on our door, completely wasted. My boyfriend jumped out of bed like the apartment was on fire. Bob stumbled in, threw up in our kitchen sink, and my boyfriend literally picked me up and moved me to the couch so Bob could have the bed. He needs me right now, he said. Like that explained everything. I laid on that couch listening to Bob snoring in my spot, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I tried talking to him once. Really talking. He leaned back in his chair with this disappointed look. I thought you were more confident than this. Are you really that jealous of my friendship? This insecurity isn't a good look, especially at work. That's when I realized, if I couldn't tell him how wrong this was, maybe I could show him. Or better yet, let him show everyone himself. That's when I decided something. His birthday was coming up, and he'd rented out the back room of this upscale bar for a party. I was going to let him and Bob do exactly what they always did. Mock me, belittle me, treat me like garbage. Except this time, his coworkers would be watching. I was going to be the perfect girlfriend at that party. Sweet, supportive, dressed beautifully. And I knew Bob wouldn't be able to help himself. And my boyfriend would do what he always did. Except this time, there would be witnesses. I arrived at the party looking better than I had in months. Black dress, professional but flattering, the kind of thing that says, I belong here, without trying too hard. My boyfriend's eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a second, I remembered why I'd fallen for him. Then Bob's voice cut through the music. Wow, wearing that to your boss's party? The room went quiet for a beat. Our coworker Hugo raised an eyebrow. Sarah from marketing looked between us. My boyfriend laughed. Bob, be nice to my assistant. She knows I'm kidding, Bob said, throwing his arm around my boyfriend's shoulders. Right, sweetheart? The night progressed exactly as I'd expected. Bob interrupting every time I tried to speak. Bob retelling stories where I was the punchline. My boyfriend laughing along, occasionally throwing in a, she's being dramatic when I wasn't even reacting. Then Bob stood up, raising his beer. I want to make a toast to my boy here. Everyone turned to listen. To the man who could date any woman in this city but chose his subordinate. Hey, at least she knows who signs her checks. The silence was deafening. Sarah's mouth actually fell open. Hugo set down his drink. Lisa from accounting looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. My boyfriend laughed. Bob's had a few, everyone. That's when Sarah stood up. What the F did you just say? The entire room turned. My boyfriend's face went red. You're all misunderstanding the situation. This is what she does. We're not misunderstanding anything, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I'm documenting this conversation for HR. You're all overreacting. He was yelling now. I'll remember this when reviews come around. You think you know her? She's been trying to turn everyone against Bob since day one. Bob laughed. Told you she wasn't cut out for this level. Diversity hire, right? The room exploded. 3 people had their phones out, recording. My hands won't stop shaking, and I can feel everyone staring, but I force myself to stay perfectly still while the chaos builds around me. Sarah's phone is pointed straight at my ex, steady as anything, and I spot Hugo holding his up too, along with at least 3 other people I work with. My ex's face does this thing where it goes from angry red to this sick white color, like he just figured out what's actually happening here. He starts yelling that we're all overreacting, that this is his birthday party and we're ruining it, but nobody's listening because everyone's talking over each other now. Someone near the bar says something about HR, and someone else is asking if they heard that diversity hire comment correctly. The noise level keeps climbing and I realize this is it. This is exactly what I planned for. Except now that it's happening, I feel kind of sick. Bob tries to save it by laughing and clapping my ex on the shoulder, saying something about how everyone's too sensitive these days and can't take a joke anymore. But people are already grabbing their coats and bags, heading for the door in this steady stream that's impossible to miss. Lisa from accounting walks straight up to me and asks quietly if I'm okay, if I need a ride home. I nod yes to both because I don't trust my voice right now, and my hands are shaking so bad I nearly drop my coat when I grab it. She stays right next to me as we head for the door and I can feel my ex watching us leave. We make it outside into the parking lot and the cold air hits my face. I'm halfway to Lisa's car when I hear him calling my name. His voice has that pleading tone he uses when he wants something, insisting we need to talk about this right now, that everyone misunderstood. Lisa actually steps between us and tells him firmly that he needs to back off and go deal with his remaining guests. He stares at both of us like we just stabbed him in the back. Then he turns and storms back inside, and I can hear him yelling at someone through the door. Lisa unlocks her car and I slide into the passenger seat. The adrenaline that's been keeping me upright starts wearing off, and I feel this exhausted relief wash over me. She doesn't push me to talk, just starts the car and asks for my address in this careful voice. I give her directions and she drives carefully, taking the turns slow. After a few minutes, she mentions quietly that she's seen how Bob treats me during client meetings. She says she's glad someone finally said something even if it wasn't her. I want to ask what she means, but I'm too tired, so I just nod. We pull up to my apartment building around 11, and I thank her probably 3 times before I get out. She tells me to text her if I need anything, and I believe she means it. I get inside and immediately grab my laptop. Everything that just happened needs to be written down while it's still fresh in my head. Every comment Bob made tonight, every time my ex laughed along or added his own joke at my expense, every single person I saw recording on their phones. I write down timestamps as best as I can remember them. Bob's assistant comment was maybe 8:30. The toast was around 9:15. The explosion happened at 9:20. I know by Monday morning this is going to blow up at work, and I need to have everything documented. My hands are still shaking while I type, but I keep going. I include the dinner reservation he canceled for Bob. The night Bob threw up in our sink and took our bed. The conversation where he called me insecure and said it wasn't a good look at work. All of it goes into this document that's growing longer and longer. When I finally close my laptop, it's almost 1 in the morning. Sleep doesn't come easily. I lie there in bed, alternating between replaying the confrontation and panicking about what happens next to my career. I moved across the country for this job. I broke my lease in Seattle. This company is the only one in the city doing the kind of sustainable marketing I specialized in for my entire master's program. These positions don't exactly grow on trees, but I also can't unsee the looks on my coworkers' faces when they realized what they'd been watching happen to me for months. I can't unfeel the satisfaction of watching him squirm when Sarah stood up with her phone out. I finally fall asleep around 4 and wake up at 7 to my phone buzzing constantly. Sunday morning brings this flood of texts from coworkers. Most are supportive, but some are clearly anxious about the fallout. Sarah sends a long message saying she already forwarded her video to HR's emergency line and wants to meet for coffee if I'm up for it. Hugo texts that he's willing to provide a statement about what he witnessed. 2 people I barely know from other departments send brief messages of support that actually feel real. I text Sarah back and we agree to meet at this coffee shop far from our usual spots. She's already there when I arrive, sitting in the back corner with 2 cups in front of her. She slides one across to me and pulls out her phone. The video she took is clearer and way more awful than I expected. You can hear every single word Bob said. You can see my ex laughing right after the subordinate comment. The thread about reviews comes through perfectly clear. I watch myself standing there in my black dress looking calm while everything explodes around me. Sarah tells me HR already contacted her, and she has a meeting scheduled for Monday morning. She says I should expect a call too. We sit there for almost 2 hours going over everything that happened and everything we remember from before. She mentions 3 times she wishes she'd said something sooner. I tell her I'm glad she said something at all. The HR call comes Sunday afternoon while I'm trying to eat lunch and failing. Dean Fletcher introduces himself as the HR director, and I can tell his weekend just got completely ruined. He's professional but clearly stressed. He asks me to come in Monday at 8, before regular office hours start. He confirms this is about the incident at the party. He mentions that multiple employees have filed complaints, so this is being treated as a serious workplace conduct investigation. His voice is careful, and I can't tell if that's good or bad for me. I spend Sunday evening preparing for the meeting like I'm getting ready for war. I print out old emails where my ex blurred professional and personal boundaries. I document the timeline of our relationship against my employment dates. I include the text where he canceled our dinner plans for Bob with a screenshot. I find the messages I sent my best friend about the 2 a.m. incident with Bob taking our bed. I'm building a case, and the strategic part of my brain that planned the whole party confrontation is working overtime now. I organize everything into a folder with tabs and labels. By the time I'm done, it's almost midnight, and I have this thick stack of evidence that tells a story I didn't fully see while I was living it. I wake up Monday morning with my stomach in knots, staring at my alarm before it even goes off. The HR meeting is at 8, which means I need to be in the building before most people arrive. I shower and dress in my most professional outfit, a navy blazer and gray pants that say I take this seriously without trying too hard. The folder of evidence sits on my kitchen counter, thick and organized, and I grab it along with my laptop bag. The drive to the office feels longer than usual, even though traffic is light this early. I park in my usual spot and sit in my car for 5 minutes, breathing slowly and running through everything I need to say. The building lobby is mostly empty when I walk in, just the security guard who nods at me like it's any other Monday. I take the elevator to the 3rd floor where HR is located, and my hands are shaking slightly as I press the button. Dean is waiting in a conference room when I arrive, a plain space with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. He stands and shakes my hand, his grip firm and professional, then gestures for me to sit. He's maybe mid-40s, wearing a button-down shirt with no tie, and he has this calm expression that gives nothing away. I set my folder on the table and he sets up his laptop, explaining that he'll be taking notes throughout our conversation. He starts with basic questions about my employment history and my role at the company, warming me up before we get to the hard stuff. Then he asks me to walk him through the relationship from the beginning, and I do, starting with how my ex pursued me and how I was hesitant because of the reporting structure. Dean types steadily as I talk, his face neutral, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates or specific incidents. When I get to the part about Bob, about the canceled dinner and the 2 a.m. incident where I got moved to the couch, I see Dean's jaw tighten slightly. He doesn't interrupt, just keeps typing. But I can tell that detail landed. I pull out the screenshots I printed, the text about the canceled dinner, the messages I sent my best friend that night describing what happened. Dean examines each one carefully, making notes about the dates and context. I walk him through more incidents, the pattern of Bob's behavior and my ex's enabling, the way he dismissed my concerns and told me I was being insecure. Dean asks if I reported any of this to HR before the party, and I explain that I was afraid to because my ex was my boss and I needed the job. He nods slowly and makes another note. When I get to the party itself, I describe everything in detail. Bob's comments, my ex's responses, the threat about reviews. Dean stops typing and looks at me directly when I mention that threat. He asks me to repeat exactly what was said, and I do, word for word. He tells me that comment about remembering this when reviews come around is what they call retaliation, and it's a serious policy violation on its own, separate from everything else. There's something validating about hearing him say that, about the company finally acknowledging that what happened was wrong. We go through the rest of the party incident, and I show him the timeline I created, matching up my account with what other people witnessed. Dean asks about my relationship with Sarah and Hugo and Lisa, whether I asked them to record or document anything. I tell him no, that they did that on their own because they were shocked by what they were seeing. He asks if I've had contact with my ex since the party, and I tell him about the parking lot confrontation, but that Lisa intervened. Dean makes a note about that too. The meeting lasts almost 3 hours, and by the end I'm exhausted from reliving everything in such detail. Dean thanks me for being thorough and tells me he'll be interviewing other witnesses over the next few days. He asks me to continue documenting anything else I remember, and to let him know immediately if my ex tries to contact me. I leave the conference room feeling drained and head down to my desk, which feels surreal after spending the morning in HR. The office is filling up now, people arriving for the normal workday, and I can feel eyes on me as I walk through the open workspace. Sarah catches my eye from across the room and gives me a small nod, but she doesn't come over, probably because people are watching. I log into my computer and try to focus on actual work, opening my email and seeing a backlog of client communications I need to respond to. But I can't concentrate. My mind keeps replaying the meeting with Dean and wondering what he's thinking about everything I told him. The morning drags by slowly, and I notice that my ex's office door is closed and his desk area is empty. Bob isn't anywhere in the building either, which makes sense but also makes everything feel strange and tense. People are being careful around me, not making eye contact in the break room, and I can tell word has spread that something major is happening. Around noon, Sarah stops by my desk and leans in close, her voice quiet. She tells me that 3 other people have reported their own incidents with Bob's inappropriate behavior during client visits, stuff that happened over the past year that they never formally complained about. I feel this mix of validation and anger, because if people had spoken up before, maybe I wouldn't have had to deal with this for so long. Sarah says the investigation is bigger than just the party now, that HR is looking at a pattern of behavior. She squeezes my shoulder and heads back to her desk before anyone can notice us talking. I spend the afternoon trying to work but mostly refreshing my email and wondering what's happening in those closed-door meetings. By the time I leave at 5, I'm mentally exhausted, and my actual work productivity has been basically zero. Tuesday morning, I'm expecting to go into the office like normal, but at 7:30 I get a call from Dean asking me to come in for another meeting. My stomach drops because I thought yesterday covered everything, but I grab my things and head in. Dean is in the same conference room, and this time he looks more serious. He explains that because of the workplace relationship, the company needs to separate me and my ex physically during the investigation. I feel my chest tighten as he talks, explaining that I'm being moved to work-from-home status temporarily. He emphasizes multiple times that this isn't a suspension, that I'm still being paid my full salary, that this is just standard protocol when there's an active investigation involving a workplace relationship. I ask why I'm the one being sent home when I'm not the one who did anything wrong, and Dean's expression is sympathetic but firm. He says they need to create physical separation, and that this is the cleanest way to do it while they sort everything out. I ask if my ex is also being sent home, and Dean pauses before saying that's being handled separately. I can read between the lines that my ex is staying in the office, which seems completely backward to me. Dean hands me a packet of information about remote work setup, VPN access, and how to schedule meetings. He tells me I should plan to work from home for at least 2 weeks while the investigation continues. I feel simultaneously relieved that I won't have to face my ex in the office and punished for something I didn't do. The relief part surprises me because I realize I've been dreading going into work every day, wondering if I'll run into him in the hallway or the parking garage. But the punishment part stings. The message that I'm the problem that needs to be removed from the office. Dean must see something in my face because he says again that this is standard protocol, that it's not a reflection on me or the investigation findings. I nod and gather the paperwork, feeling numb. I head back to my apartment and set up my laptop at the kitchen table, which isn't exactly an ergonomic workspace, but it'll have to do. The rest of Tuesday passes in this weird, isolated bubble, responding to emails and joining conference calls from my apartment. It feels surreal to be doing my normal job tasks while this investigation is happening in the background. I keep thinking about my ex walking through the office, sitting at his desk, going to meetings, while I'm stuck at home like I'm the one being investigated. Wednesday morning, I check my email and see I've been CC'd on a chain about client meetings for the sustainable marketing project I've been leading. The emails are all going to other people now. My name buried in the CC line instead of being the primary contact. I scroll through and realize I'm suddenly not attending these meetings, that other people are taking over my responsibilities. I forward the chain to Dean asking if this is part of the work-from-home arrangement, and he calls me back within an hour. He explains that they're trying to minimize disruption to client relationships during the investigation, which is HR speak for they don't trust me to handle client work right now. I argue that I'm the one who built these relationships, that I should at least be kept in the loop, but Dean says the decision came from senior management. I hang up feeling angry and helpless, watching my career get dismantled while I sit in my apartment. Sarah texts me that afternoon with an update from the office. She says my ex has been in closed-door meetings with Kira Meadows, the senior partner, and that the energy in the office is tense. She says people are taking sides or trying to stay neutral, avoiding talking about the situation but clearly thinking about it. I ask her how people are treating her, and she says some coworkers have been distant, probably worried about being associated with the drama. She tells me not to worry about her, that she can handle it, but I feel guilty for dragging her into this mess. Thursday and Friday blur together in this isolated routine of working from home, joining video calls where I can see everyone else in the office together while I'm alone in my apartment. I try to focus on the work I can still do, updating marketing materials and writing content, but I'm not attending the important strategy meetings anymore. I notice that my ex is on several of the same calls, his video off, and I wonder if he can see me or if he's even paying attention. The distance makes everything feel less real. Like maybe I imagined how bad it was, except I have my folder of evidence and the HR investigation to remind me it definitely happened. By Friday afternoon, I'm going stir-crazy from being home all week, and I realize that being right about the toxic behavior doesn't protect me from professional consequences. I check my email and see responses from 3 coworkers I used to be friendly with, and their messages are noticeably cooler than before, more formal and distant. They're clearly uncomfortable with the drama and don't want to be pulled into it. Another 2 coworkers have reached out with supportive messages, saying they believe me and they're glad I spoke up, but even they admit they're worried about being too closely associated with the situation. One of them mentions that management has been asking questions about who knew about the relationship and when, like they're trying to figure out who else to blame. I'm learning that workplace solidarity has real limits when people feel like their own jobs might be threatened. The weekends with me feeling professionally isolated and starting to panic about my career. I moved across the country for this position, broke my lease in Seattle, and this company is literally the only one in the city doing sustainable marketing at this level. These specialized positions don't exactly grow on trees, and now I'm watching mine crumble while I sit at home. I spend Friday evening updating my resume and LinkedIn profile, trying to figure out what I would even say about this job if I had to leave. How do you explain a 6-month gap where you dated your boss and then triggered an HR investigation? I close my laptop feeling defeated and wondering if my strategic plan at the party was actually the biggest mistake of my professional life. Monday of the second week, Dean calls for a follow-up interview, and this time his questions are harder and more pointed. He wants to know why I continued the relationship after the early warning signs, why I didn't report Bob's behavior to HR sooner, why I waited until the party to let everything explode publicly. I try to explain the power dynamic, that my ex was my direct supervisor and I was afraid of losing my job. I describe how he made me feel like I was the problem, that I was too sensitive and insecure, and how that made me doubt my own judgment. But even as I'm explaining, I can hear how it sounds, like I'm admitting I made a series of bad choices. Dean isn't unkind about it, but he's clearly building a complete picture of the situation, and that picture includes my own questionable decisions. He asks if I understood company policy about workplace relationships, and I have to admit I did, that there's a disclosure form we were supposed to file and we never did. He asks if my ex pressured me not to file it, and I say he suggested we keep things quiet until we were more serious, which seemed reasonable at the time. Dean makes notes and I can see him connecting dots that don't make me look great. He asks about my decision to let the party confrontation happen, instead of reporting Bob's behavior through proper channels earlier. I explain that I tried talking to my ex directly, and he dismissed my concerns, that I felt like I had no other option. Dean points out that I could have gone to HR directly at any time, and I don't have a good answer for that except that I was scared, and I didn't think anyone would believe me over my boss. The interview lasts 2 hours, and by the end I feel like I've been put on trial for my own harassment. Dean thanks me for my time and says he'll be in touch, and I hang up feeling worse than I did before. Wednesday afternoon, Sarah forwards me an email chain she was accidentally included on, and I can tell from her message that she's upset about what she saw. The email is between two senior managers discussing the situation, and they're debating whether the relationship itself was a fireable offense for both of us. One manager argues that I should have reported it to HR immediately when it started, that by not doing so I was complicit in the policy violation. The other manager points out that my ex was my boss and had the power in the situation, that it's not fair to put equal blame on me. They go back and forth about whether the company should terminate both of us, just him, or try to find some other solution. Reading it makes my blood run cold because I realize they're seriously considering firing me, not for being harassed, but for being in the relationship at all. Sarah adds a note at the bottom saying she's sorry I have to see this, but she thought I should know what's being discussed. I'm grateful for her loyalty in showing me, but it confirms my worst fears about how I'm being perceived by the company. I'm not the victim who spoke up about harassment. I'm the employee who violated relationship disclosure policies, and then caused a public scene that embarrassed the company. I spend the rest of the day in a fog, trying to work, but mostly panicking about losing my job and my career. 10 days after the party, I get a call from an employment attorney that Lisa from accounting recommended. I spend an hour on the phone walking through everything that happened, and the attorney listens carefully before giving me her assessment. She explains that while the workplace relationship itself was problematic and I should have disclosed it, my ex's retaliation and creation of a hostile work environment are clear violations of company policy and possibly employment law. She says the threat about reviews, the enabling of Bob's harassment, and the pattern of behavior I documented all support a hostile work environment claim. She offers to represent me if I decide I need legal help, but she warns that fighting this could mean burning bridges in my specialized industry. She explains that employment law cases are expensive, time-consuming, and often end in settlements that include non-disclosure agreements. She asks what outcome I actually want, and I realize I don't know anymore. I wanted accountability, and I wanted to keep my job, but it's looking like I might not get both. The attorney tells me to think about it and call her back if I decide I want to pursue legal action. She sends me her retainer agreement and fee schedule, and I spend the evening staring at the numbers and trying to figure out if I can afford to fight this. Thursday morning, I wake up to a long email from my ex, his first direct contact since the party. The email starts with an apology, saying he's sorry for how things got out of hand and he never meant to hurt me. But then it quickly shifts into explaining why everyone misunderstood the situation. He writes that Bob was just joking around like he always does, that I'm too sensitive and took everything the wrong way. He says he never meant the comment about reviews as a threat, that I'm destroying his reputation over a misunderstanding. He claims that Bob's been his friend for 15 years, and I'm trying to ruin that friendship because I can't handle normal guy banter. The email goes on for 3 pages, alternating between apologizing and defending himself, and it ends with a suggestion that we could both move past this if I would just talk to the partners and clarify that things got blown out of proportion. He writes that we could both keep our jobs and put this behind us if I would just be reasonable. Reading it makes me furious because he still doesn't get it. He still thinks this is about me being too sensitive instead of about his behavior being actually wrong. I don't respond to the email at all. I just forward it directly to Dean with a brief note saying my ex contacted me during the investigation. I hit send and close my laptop, my hands shaking with anger. Friday afternoon, Dean calls me and his voice is more serious than usual. He tells me that my ex's email constitutes continued inappropriate contact during an active investigation, which is another policy violation. Dean says my ex has been formally warned to stop trying to reach me, and that any further contact will result in immediate disciplinary action. There's something validating about that, about the company finally seeing his behavior as problematic and taking action. But then Dean's tone shifts slightly, and he mentions almost casually that the partners have been discussing whether the sustainable marketing position is still viable given the circumstances. My stomach drops and I ask him what that means, and he says he can't discuss personnel decisions that haven't been finalized yet. He tells me to continue working from home and that he'll update me early next week about next steps. I hang up and sit in my apartment staring at the wall, realizing that I might lose my job anyway despite being right about everything. The specialized position I moved across the country for, the career path I carefully built, all of it might disappear because I spoke up about harassment. I think about the attorney's warning about burning bridges and wonder if I already have. That weekend, I start sending out careful emails to contacts at other firms, keeping my messages short and professional, asking if they know about any openings in sustainable marketing. 2 people respond quickly with sympathy and promises to keep me updated if they hear anything. One contact from a competing firm asks me directly what happened at my current company, and I realize the story is already spreading through our small industry network. I craft a careful response that sticks to facts without sounding bitter, but I can feel my stomach turning as I hit send. Another contact I thought I had a good relationship with stops responding to my messages entirely after the first exchange, and I spend an hour staring at my phone wondering what version of events they heard and who told them. Monday morning brings more anxiety as I try to focus on actual work tasks, updating client reports and reviewing campaign metrics. But my mind keeps drifting back to the investigation, and what happens if I lose this job. 3 weeks after the party, my phone rings with Dean's number, and my heart starts racing before I even answer. His voice sounds tired when he tells me that my ex-boyfriend has filed his own HR complaint, claiming I deliberately planned and executed the birthday party incident to damage his professional reputation and sabotage his career. Dean asks me to provide a written statement responding to this accusation, and I feel rage and fear mixing together in my chest, because now it looks like a he said she said situation instead of what actually happened. I spend the rest of that day writing and rewriting my response, documenting every incident that led up to the party, every time Bob insulted me while my ex-boyfriend laughed, every boundary that got crossed. The next morning, Dean calls again to tell me that Sarah and Hugo have both provided detailed statements supporting my version of events and confirming they witnessed the pattern of behavior before the party even happened. He mentions that Bethany Randolph from the client services team came forward with her own account of Bob making inappropriate comments during a business dinner 3 months ago, with my ex-boyfriend sitting right there laughing along. The investigation is expanding beyond just the party to look at a broader pattern of behavior, and I feel a flash of validation mixed with exhaustion at how big this is getting. My 4th week working from home drags by in a blur of video calls and spreadsheets that I can barely focus on, because I'm constantly checking my email for updates about the investigation. I miss 2 important client strategy meetings because I forget they're on my calendar, and I turn in a campaign analysis late because I spent 3 hours obsessing over LinkedIn instead of working. Dean sends me a kind email assuring me that my work performance during this period won't be held against me given the circumstances, but I know how this looks to everyone else. I'm watching my carefully built professional reputation fall apart in real time, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rings with an unknown number, and when I answer, it's Kira Meadows asking if I can meet her for coffee the next morning at a place across town from the office. The senior partner wants to meet with me off-site, and I spend the evening trying not to panic about what that means. Thursday morning, I arrive at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and order a drink I barely taste while I wait. Kira shows up exactly on time wearing a sharp suit and carrying a leather portfolio, and she gets straight to business after ordering her coffee. She tells me the firm is taking the investigation very seriously, and they're committed to addressing the issues that came to light. But she also needs me to understand that Bob's company is one of their biggest clients, and they have to consider that relationship carefully. She doesn't quite say that I'm less important than a major client contract, but the implication sits heavy in the air between us, and I feel my anger starting to rise despite my attempts to stay calm and professional. Then Kira surprises me by asking what I actually want as an outcome from all this, and I realize I haven't let myself think clearly about that question because I've been too busy just surviving each day. I tell her I want real accountability for the behavior, not just a slap on the wrist. I want policy changes so this doesn't happen to someone else in the future. And I want to keep doing the work I moved across the country for, the specialized sustainable marketing that I'm actually good at. Kira listens carefully and takes notes, nodding at each point, and then she tells me she'll take my input into consideration as they work toward a resolution. But her expression when she says that last part makes it clear that keeping my job might be the hardest of those 3 things to deliver. 2 days later, I get an email from HR scheduling a mediation session with my ex-boyfriend for the following week, and just reading the calendar invite makes me feel sick. The day of the mediation, I drive to the office building for the first time in a month, and security has to call up to confirm I'm supposed to be there because my badge access has been suspended. The mediator is a professional woman in her 50s who works for an outside firm the company hired, and she starts by explaining the ground rules and process will follow. My ex-boyfriend sits across the table from me looking defensive and angry, and when it's his turn to speak, he alternates between justifications for his behavior and what sounds like scripted apologies his lawyer probably wrote out for him. He says he never meant to make me uncomfortable, that Bob's humor is just how guys talk to each other, that the comment about reviews was taken out of context. When I try to explain how his constant enabling of Bob's behavior affected me and made me feel worthless at work, he interrupts to say I'm being dramatic and making this into something it wasn't. The mediator has to step in and remind him that I get to finish speaking without interruption. The whole session lasts 3 hours and feels like the longest afternoon of my life, and we don't reach any real resolution beyond both signing documents that acknowledge we participated in the mediation process. Walking to my car afterward, I feel completely drained and defeated, wondering if my strategic plan at the party was actually worth this endless bureaucratic nightmare that's consuming my life. Then I check my phone and see a message from a coworker I barely know thanking me for speaking up, saying she's been dealing with similar treatment from a different manager, and my actions gave her courage to file her own complaint. Reading that message reminds me why I did this in the first place. 5 weeks after the party, I'm scrolling through job listings when I see a posting for a sustainable marketing position at a smaller firm in a different city. The pay is slightly less than what I make now, and it's not quite the same level of prestige, but it's a clean start away from all this mess. I update my resume and submit an application that same day, then schedule a phone interview for the following week. Part of me feels like I'm running away, but another part knows this might be the smart strategic choice, and I can't tell which feeling is more accurate. The next morning, Dean calls with an update that the investigation is wrapping up, and findings will be presented to the partners within the week. He can't tell me any specifics yet, but his tone suggests the findings aren't going to make anyone happy with the situation. Then he asks me directly if I'm planning to stay with the company long term, and I hear the real question underneath his words clearly. They're trying to figure out how to resolve this whole situation with the least amount of disruption possible, and me leaving would be convenient for everyone involved except me. I tell him I'll let him know my plans once I have more information, and we end the call. 2 days later, I'm sitting at my kitchen table doing a video interview with the smaller firm, and the hiring manager seems genuinely interested in my sustainable marketing background and the projects I've led. She asks smart questions about my approach to client relationships and campaign strategy, and I find myself relaxing into the conversation and remembering why I love this work in the first place. The interview lasts almost 90 minutes, way longer than the scheduled hour, and when we finish, she tells me they'll be in touch soon. I hang up feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in weeks, like maybe there's a path forward that doesn't involve this endless investigation nightmare. The next morning, I get an email from their HR department with a formal job offer attached, asking me to start in 3 weeks and offering a salary that's about 5% less than what I make now. I stare at the number on my screen and do the math in my head, figuring out if I can make it work with my rent and student loans. It's doable, just barely, and the position itself is exactly the kind of work I want to be doing. I write back asking for 2 days to review the offer and discuss it with my family, which is professional code for I need time to think. That night, I pour myself a glass of wine and sit on my couch looking at the offer letter on my laptop, and I let myself really feel the grief of what I'm losing here. I moved across the country for this job, broke my lease in my old city, left my friends and my favorite coffee shop and the farmer's market I went to every Saturday. I built a career here, or I thought I was building one, and now I'm looking at starting over somewhere smaller and less prestigious because I refuse to keep my mouth shut about being treated like garbage. The wine tastes bitter and I close my laptop and go to bed without making any decisions, but I already know what I'm going to do. 3 days after I get the job offer, Dean calls my cell phone at 8 in the morning asking if I can come to the office for an in-person meeting about the investigation findings. His voice sounds careful and formal, the tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news they're trying to frame as neutral information. I tell him I can be there in an hour, and I spend that time getting dressed in actual work clothes for the first time in weeks, and doing my makeup like I'm going into battle. The drive to the office feels surreal after a month of working from home, and I have to get a visitor badge from security because my access card doesn't work anymore. Dean meets me in the lobby and walks me to a small conference room on the 3rd floor, and he's carrying a thick folder that I assume contains all the statements and evidence from the investigation. He sits down across from me and opens the folder and starts walking through the findings in this measured, professional tone that makes everything sound clinical and distant. My ex-boyfriend violated multiple company policies regarding workplace relationships, specifically the failure to disclose the relationship to HR and the power dynamic issues inherent in dating a direct report. He also violated policies on retaliation when he made that comment about remembering things at review time, and he created a hostile work environment by enabling and participating in inappropriate behavior. Bob has been banned from company premises entirely, and the client relationship is being restructured, so he has minimal involvement with our projects going forward. Dean delivers all of this information like he's reading a weather report, and I feel this weird mix of vindication and numbness, listening to him confirm what I already knew was true. Then he pauses and looks down at his papers, and his whole tone shifts slightly, and I know the real news is coming now. The partners have decided that the Sustainable Marketing Division needs restructuring, he tells me, and my position is being eliminated as part of a broader reorganization of the department. They're offering me a generous severance package and strong references for future employment, and this decision is officially unrelated to the investigation and the findings we just discussed. He slides another folder across the table with the severance paperwork inside, and I don't open it because I'm too busy trying to control my face and my breathing. I ask him directly if my ex-boyfriend is keeping his job, and the question hangs in the air for a long moment before Dean admits that yes, he's being demoted and reassigned to a different division with no direct reports, but he'll remain with the company. The double standard is so obvious and blatant that I actually laugh, this short, bitter sound that makes Dean wince and look away. I cut him off when he starts explaining about client relationships and institutional knowledge and all the complicated business reasons why they can't fire him, and I tell him I'll review the severance package with my attorney before I sign anything. Dean nods and tells me to take all the time I need, and we both know he's relieved when I stand up to leave. I call Sarah from my car in the parking lot, and when I tell her what happened, she starts swearing so loudly I have to hold the phone away from my ear. She threatens to quit and protest, and I spend 20 minutes talking her down and reminding her that she has rent to pay and a career to protect. We agree to meet for drinks after work, and when I get to the bar that evening, she's already there with a bottle of wine ordered. She tells me the office has been completely divided since the investigation started, with about half the people thinking I got screwed over, and the other half thinking I caused unnecessary drama and made everyone's jobs harder. The whole situation exposed problems in the company culture that were always there, but nobody wanted to acknowledge, and now everyone's picking sides, and the workplace feels tense and uncomfortable. I pour myself another glass of wine and tell her about the job offer from the other firm, and she looks sad but not surprised. The next morning, I schedule a call with my attorney, and she reviews the severance package over video chat, while I watch her face for reactions. She tells me it's actually quite generous, probably because the company wants to avoid any possibility of a wrongful termination lawsuit. "We could fight this if I want to," she explains, "but it would be expensive and time-consuming, and it might damage my reputation in the industry even further than it already has been. The practical advice is to take the money, take the new job, and move forward with my career and my life." I thank her and end the call and sit there staring at my laptop screen, and it feels like swallowing poison. But I know she's right about the practical reality of my situation. I send an email to the new company accepting their job offer, and then I open the severance paperwork and start reading through all the legal language about non-disparagement clauses and release of claims. During my last 2 weeks at the company, working remotely to transition my projects to other team members, I get a message from Bethany asking if we can talk privately. She tells me that 2 other women have come forward with their own complaints about different managers, inspired by watching the investigation process and seeing that the company actually took it seriously. The HR department is apparently scrambling to address what's turning into a much bigger culture problem than anyone wanted to admit existed, and there's talk of mandatory training and policy changes and oversight committees. I feel this complicated mix of validation, that my actions triggered real change, and frustration, that I won't be there to benefit from any of it, and I don't know which feeling is stronger. Hugo sends me a text a few days later telling me that my ex-boyfriend has been completely ostracized in the office, eating lunch alone at his desk and getting frozen out of casual conversations and after-work drinks. Part of me feels satisfied hearing this, like he's finally experiencing consequences for his behavior. But another part of me recognizes it as the same toxic dynamics, just playing out in a different direction. The company hasn't actually fixed anything fundamental about how people treat each other or how power works. They've just reshuffled who gets to be on top and who gets pushed out. I signed the severance agreement and the new job offer paperwork in the same afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with both documents spread out in front of me. It feels like closing one chapter and opening another one, except the new chapter is smaller and less impressive than the one I thought I was writing. That evening, I let myself have real grief about what I'm losing. Not just the specific job, but the whole career path I'd planned, and the belief that doing good work and speaking up about bad behavior would be enough to protect me. I cry for about an hour, and then I order takeout and watch stupid TV shows until I fall asleep on the couch. My last day at the company is completely anticlimactic, just driving to the office to return my laptop and badge to the security desk since I've been remote for weeks anyway. Sarah meets me in the parking lot with flowers and a card that she had a bunch of our coworkers sign, and I can see names from people across different departments who supported me through this whole mess. It's a sweet gesture that makes my eyes water, and she hugs me tight and tells me I did the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. The week between jobs, I spend mostly on my couch, sleeping too much and scrolling through job boards without really seeing them. I schedule an appointment with a therapist because I know I need help sorting through everything that happened. Her office is small and comfortable, and she doesn't try to tell me I should feel one particular way about the situation. Instead, she helps me understand that I can be proud of exposing the bad behavior and also angry about what it cost me professionally. Both feelings are real and true at the same time, and holding them together doesn't make me weak or confused. I go twice that first week and schedule weekly appointments going forward, and just having someone who understands the mess of it all helps more than I expected. Starting the new job feels strange, like walking into a building where I don't know where anything is or how people do things. The company is smaller, with maybe 60 people total instead of 200, and the office has this casual energy that's completely different from my old firm. My new boss is named Jennifer Park, and she built the marketing division from nothing over the past 5 years. During our first meeting, just the 2 of us in her office, she tells me directly that she hired me partly because she respects what I did at my previous company. She says it takes real courage to speak up about toxic behavior when you know it might hurt your career, and she wants people on her team who have that kind of backbone. It's the first time anyone in a position of power has called my actions brave instead of problematic or dramatic, and I feel something tight in my chest start to loosen. 2 months into the new job, I'm checking LinkedIn during my lunch break when I see a message from someone named Amanda Corey. She says she worked at my old company in the finance division and never met me personally, but she wanted to thank me for speaking up about what happened. She explains that my situation triggered a huge review of workplace culture across the entire company. Now there's required training for all managers about appropriate conduct and power dynamics. They created new reporting structures for any romantic relationships, with real protections against payback if someone reports a problem. She tells me that 3 managers have been quietly pushed out for various policy breaks that came to light during the investigation process. The changes are real and happening, even though I'm not there to see them. I read her message 3 times, feeling this complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. Sarah texts me later that week with an update I didn't ask for but somehow needed. She says my ex-boyfriend is really struggling in his new smaller role at the company. He's been applying to other firms, but his reputation has taken a serious hit in our industry. People talk and word got around about what happened at that birthday party. Bob's consulting contract wasn't renewed either, and he's apparently having similar problems finding new clients. I feel this dark satisfaction reading Sarah's text, but it's not the big triumphant moment I might have imagined back when I was planning that party confrontation. It's just messy and complicated like everything else about this whole situation. I text Sarah back with a thumbs up and then put my phone away. My new company lands a big client in the sustainable energy sector about 3 months after I start. Jennifer calls me into her office and asks if I want to lead the marketing strategy for the account. It's exactly the kind of important, visible work I was doing at my old firm, the reason I moved across the country in the first place. She gives me real freedom to make decisions and come up with creative ideas, trusting my judgment in a way my ex-boyfriend never really did. I work late several nights developing the pitch, and when we present it to the client, they love it. Walking out of that meeting, I realize I'm actually happier here despite the lower prestige and smaller office. The work matters to me, and I'm being treated with basic respect, which turns out to be worth more than a fancy title at a toxic company. 6 months after leaving my old company, I get an email inviting me to speak on a panel about workplace ethics at an industry conference. My first reaction is to delete it and pretend I never saw it. I don't want to be defined forever by what happened. Don't want to be the cautionary tale people whisper about. But I mention it to my therapist during our weekly session, and she encourages me to think about it differently. Maybe I can use what I went through to help other people who are dealing with similar situations. I agree to do the panel, and when the day comes, I'm nervous, but I get through it. Afterward, several young professionals come up to me and share their own stories about dealing with power imbalances and toxic relationships at work. One woman is actually crying as she thanks me for being honest about how hard it was, and I'm glad I said yes to the panel. Around the same time, I learned that my old company has put in place new policies specifically about workplace relationships and how clients should behave. There are clear reporting structures now and real protections against anyone facing payback for speaking up. Dean Fletcher sends me an email saying that while the company can't say it publicly, my situation was the reason they made all these changes. He thanks me for my courage, which feels strange coming from someone who was part of the system that pushed me out. It's something, I guess, even if it feels like cold comfort given what it cost me personally. I don't respond to his email right away because I'm not sure what to say. I start dating again, carefully, and I notice myself watching for any signs of power games or red flags in ways I wasn't before. My therapist says this awareness is healthy as long as it doesn't stop me from taking chances on people. I go on a few dates with someone who works in software development, a completely different industry from mine, and it feels good to keep my work life and personal life totally separate. We talk about our jobs, but neither of us has any connection to the other's workplace, and that boundary feels important and right. I'm learning to trust my gut again, to notice when something feels off instead of talking myself into ignoring it. Sarah and I meet for dinner once a month, always at different restaurants, and she updates me on what's happening at the old company. She tells me the office culture has genuinely gotten better, though it's still not perfect. Several women have been promoted into leadership positions, and there's much more attention paid to professional boundaries and appropriate conduct. People still talk about what happened with me and my ex-boyfriend, she says, but usually in the context of how it changed things for the better. She's thinking about looking for a new job herself, not because things are bad, but because she's ready for new challenges. I'm proud of her for putting her own growth first. My 1-year anniversary at the new company comes with a promotion to senior marketing director and a raise that puts my salary above what I was making at the old firm. Jennifer calls me into her office to tell me the news, and she says she's impressed with my strategic thinking and my ability to build strong client relationships based on mutual respect. She mentions that several clients have specifically asked to work with me again on future projects. Sitting in her office, I realize I've rebuilt my professional reputation on my own terms, and it feels more solid than what I had before. The path here was harder and messier than I ever wanted it to be, but I got here anyway, and that means something. A few weeks later, I'm at my desk working on a campaign proposal when an email notification pops up from Lisa Corey, my old coworker from accounting. I click it open and start reading, surprised by what I find. She writes that she's been feeling guilty for months about not speaking up sooner when she witnessed how Bob and my ex treated me, and she wants me to know that she's now part of the workplace culture committee at the old company. The email explains how my situation became the turning point that made her realize staying silent wasn't neutral. It was choosing the wrong side. She tells me the committee has implemented real changes and that my courage inspired her to be more active in calling out problems when she sees them. I read it twice, feeling a mix of validation and sadness that it took something so painful to create change. I write back thanking her and telling her that meaningful change requires many people taking action over time, not just one dramatic confrontation, and I'm glad she's part of making things better. The person I've been dating for several months suggests we take a weekend trip together, and during the drive, I find myself talking about what happened at my old job without the usual tightness in my chest. I explain the whole situation, the relationship with my boss, Bob's behavior, the party confrontation, the investigation, getting pushed out. They listen without interrupting or trying to fix anything, just letting me tell the story at my own pace. When I finish, they reach over and squeeze my hand and tell me they admire how I handled an impossible situation, that it took real strength to expose the problem even knowing it might cost me professionally. The conversation shifts to other topics, but I keep thinking about how different this feels from my previous relationship. There's no judgment about my vulnerabilities, no dismissing my experience, just respect for the complexity of what I went through. Later that night, lying in bed in the hotel room, I realize I'm being seen fully, including all the messy and complicated parts, and valued for my strength, rather than criticized for not being perfect. 6 months into my job at the new company, I get an unexpected call from Dean Fletcher at my old firm. He explains they're working on a major sustainable marketing project for a renewable energy client, and they'd like to bring me in as an outside consultant for the specific initiative. The irony isn't lost on me that they eliminated my position, but now want my expertise. I tell him I need to think about it and discuss it with my current boss and therapist before deciding. My boss at the new company is supportive and sees it as a good opportunity to build my consulting profile. My therapist asks how I think I'll feel walking back into that building, and I admit I'm not sure, but I want to find out if I can handle it. After a week of consideration, I accept the consulting contract with clear boundaries about scope and timeline. The first day back feels surreal as I walk through the lobby where I used to arrive every morning for over a year. I take the elevator to the floor where my old desk used to be, and when I step out, Sarah spots me immediately and rushes over for a hug. 3 other former coworkers come by to say hello and welcome me back, and their warmth surprises me. I realize somewhere in the past year and a half, I've shifted from being the office scandal to being someone who's respected for how I navigated a difficult situation. The consulting project keeps me at the old office 2 days a week for the next month. On my 3rd day there, I'm walking down the hallway reviewing notes on my phone when I almost bump into someone coming around the corner. I look up and it's my ex, and we both freeze for a second. He looks tired, older somehow, with circles under his eyes I don't remember seeing before. We exchange brief professional pleasantries about the weather and the project, our voices careful and distant, and then we both move on without lingering. My heart is beating faster, but I don't feel the anger or hurt I expected. Mostly I just feel neutral, like he's someone I used to know rather than someone who shaped a major chapter of my life. Later that afternoon, Hugo stops by the conference room where I'm working and asks how I'm doing. I mention the hallway encounter and he nods knowingly. He tells me my ex has been in therapy for the past year, and apparently he's done real work on understanding his behavior and the power dynamics that enabled it. Hugo adds that he's not sure if it's genuine growth or just reputation management, but something has definitely changed. I thank him for the update and feel a small sense of closure, not because my ex has transformed, but because I've moved past needing him to. The consulting project wraps up successfully after 5 weeks, and Kira Meadows, the senior partner, emails to ask if I'm available for lunch to discuss potential ongoing work. We meet at a restaurant downtown, and after we order, she gets straight to the point. She tells me the project exceeded client expectations, and they've specifically requested that I be involved in the next phase if there is one. Then she does something I wasn't expecting. She apologizes, more directly and personally than I thought a senior partner would, for how the company handled my situation. She admits they prioritized institutional stability and client relationships over doing the right thing, and she acknowledges that eliminating my position while keeping my ex employed sent the wrong message about their values. She explains the company has learned from that mistake, and the cultural changes they've implemented are genuine attempts to prevent similar situations. I listen carefully, watching her face for signs of corporate performance, but she seems sincere. I tell her I appreciate the acknowledgement and that I'm open to future consulting work on a project-by-project basis. I'm not sure I fully believe the company has transformed, but I can accept the apology for what it is, an admission that they failed me even while benefiting from the changes my situation created. 2 years after the birthday party confrontation, I'm sitting in a conference room at my current company when my boss calls me into her office with a smile. She tells me the executive team has decided to promote me to Vice President of Marketing, effective immediately, with a significant raise and expanded responsibilities. I'll be leading a team of 5 people and overseeing all marketing strategy for the company's major clients. Walking back to my desk with the news still sinking in, I think about how far I've come from that night when everything exploded in front of my coworkers. I'm building the career I wanted, just on a different path than I originally planned. Over the next few months, I focus intensely on creating a healthy work environment for my team. I establish clear boundaries around work hours and personal time. I implement regular check-ins where team members can raise concerns without fear of retaliation. I'm transparent about decision-making processes and make sure credit is distributed fairly. 3 of my team members tell me separately that they appreciate my leadership style and feel respected in ways they haven't at previous jobs. I realize I'm building the kind of workplace culture I wish I'd had before, and that feels more meaningful than any title or salary increase. I'm invited to speak at another industry conference, this time about sustainable marketing strategies for renewable energy companies. I prepare my presentation carefully, focusing on technical approaches and case studies, But during the Q&A session, someone in the audience asks about navigating ethical challenges in the workplace. I pause, considering whether to share my experience, and then I decide to be more open than I've been before in professional settings. I talk about the real costs of speaking up, the professional risks and personal toll, but also the long-term benefits of staying true to your values even when it's hard. I mention that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to immediate justice or vindication, but it does lead to being able to live with yourself and build something authentic. The response is overwhelmingly positive, with several people coming up afterward to thank me for my honesty. One woman tells me she's dealing with a similar situation at her company, and my candor helped her feel less alone. A man mentions he's a manager trying to create better culture, and my perspective gave him ideas for how to address problems more effectively. Walking out of the conference center that evening, I feel like I've turned my painful experience into something useful for others, which gives it a different kind of meaning. Sarah calls me on a Tuesday afternoon sounding excited and asks if I'm free for dinner that weekend. We meet at our favorite Thai restaurant, and she tells me she's leaving our old company for a better opportunity at a growing startup. I'm thrilled for her, and we order a bottle of wine to celebrate. Over dinner, we laugh about how far we've both come since that chaotic birthday party 2 years ago. She tells me the old company has continued improving its culture and policies, but she's ready for new challenges and wants to be somewhere she can grow without the baggage of everything that happened. She says watching me prioritize my own growth over institutional loyalty gave her courage to do the same, and she credits my example with helping her recognize when it's time to move on. I'm touched by this and tell her she's been an incredible friend and ally through everything. We spend the rest of the evening reminiscing about the good parts of working together and making plans to stay in regular contact. Driving home that night, I feel proud of how we've both evolved and grateful that the friendship survived all the workplace drama. My relationship reaches a new milestone when my partner proposes during a weekend hiking trip, and I say yes without hesitation. As we start planning the wedding over the following months, I find myself reflecting on how different this partnership is from my previous relationship. There's mutual respect in every interaction and clear communication about needs and boundaries. My fiancé has never met my boss and has no involvement with my company, and that separation between professional and personal life feels healthy and right. We make decisions together as equals rather than one person wielding power over the other. When conflicts come up, we address them directly instead of dismissing or minimizing feelings. I'm building a life based on the lessons I learned from my previous relationship, even the painful ones, and I can see how those experiences taught me what I actually need in a partner. The engagement feels like a beginning built on solid ground, rather than the unstable foundation I had before. My company asks if I'd be interested in mentoring young professionals in sustainable marketing, and I immediately agree because it sounds deeply rewarding. I'm matched with 3 mentees, all women in their 20s navigating the early stages of their careers. During our monthly meetings, I share both technical skills and the wisdom I gained from my own workplace challenges. I'm honest with them about the complexities of power dynamics, the importance of documenting everything, and the reality that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to immediate justice or career advancement. I tell them about my experience not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of how you can survive difficult situations and come out stronger. Several of my mentees tell me that my candor helps them feel less alone in their own workplace struggles and gives them language for problems they weren't sure how to articulate. One mentions that knowing I rebuilt my career after everything that happened gives her hope that she can too if she faces similar challenges. Watching them grow in confidence and strategic thinking reminds me why I stayed in this field despite everything, because the work matters and helping the next generation matters even more. 3 years after everything happened, a thick envelope arrives at my office with my old company's logo in the corner. Inside is a formal invitation to speak at their annual leadership retreat about creating ethical workplace cultures. I stare at it for a solid minute, processing the fact that the same partners who eliminated my position want me to address their leadership team. My assistant pokes her head in to ask if I'm okay, and I realize I'm smiling. I accept the invitation that afternoon. The weeks leading up to the retreat, I work on my presentation during lunch breaks and evenings, refining slides about the real costs of toxic workplace dynamics and the business case for genuine cultural change. I include anonymous data about turnover rates, lost productivity, and damaged client relationships that stem from poor workplace culture. My fiancé helps me practice the delivery, timing me and offering feedback on which sections land strongest. The morning of the presentation, I walk into the same conference center where I once attended quarterly meetings as a junior employee, but this time I'm introduced as an outside expert and vice president of marketing at my current company. I see some familiar faces in the audience, including Hugo and Bethany, who both smile and give me small waves. My ex-boyfriend isn't there, which I'm grateful for. The presentation goes better than I hoped. People lean forward during the sections about institutional accountability. Several take notes when I discuss implementing better reporting structures, and a few nod in recognition when I describe the warning signs of toxic power dynamics without naming specific people. When I finish, the room erupts in applause and people actually stand up. Kira Meadows is clapping in the front row, and I see genuine respect in her expression. After the presentation, Dean Fletcher approaches me near the coffee station. He looks older but less stressed than I remember. He tells me the changes implemented after my situation have been transformative for the company, with measurably improved employee retention and satisfaction scores, even better client relationships because the culture shift affected how people interact externally too. He says they now use my case study in their management training as an example of institutional failure and successful culture change, and several other firms have asked to learn from their experience. It's bittersweet being the cautionary tale that led to improvement, but I'm genuinely glad the painful experience created lasting positive impact. Looking back on everything from the stability of my current life, I understand that the birthday party confrontation was both the worst and best professional decision I ever made. I lost the specific career path I'd planned, watched my reputation get torn apart, and spent months wondering if I'd destroyed my future over one strategic moment. But I gained self-respect, genuine professional success on my own terms, and the knowledge that I can survive difficult consequences and come out stronger. I'm happy in my work, leading a team that respects me and building marketing campaigns that matter. I'm happy in my relationship with someone who sees me as an equal partner. I carry some scars from what happened, moments where I still feel that flash of anger about the injustice of how things unfolded. But those scars made me wiser and more careful about the environments I choose and the people I trust with my career and heart. The messy, complicated journey taught me that justice isn't always immediate or perfect. Doing the right thing often costs more than you expect, but standing up for yourself is always worth it even when the price feels impossibly high.